So then I think we'll start with our good colleague, Mbui Wagacha. And Mbui, I've outlined the sort of two major focus areas that I'd like you to touch on. But I'm going to ask you to touch on those, but also give us your perspectives on the macro management and the risk management dimensions of COVID-19 that you see as highly relevant and challenging in Africa. That will be your start. Please, everybody, we will go through each of the roundtable discussants, and then we will be looking to the relevant questions that you have and have a discussion. Over to you, Mbui.
Thank you very much, and I would like to welcome my colleagues, some of whom we've met in New York and Johannesburg, and I'm very, very glad to rejoin you at this critical time in our economic history. And I would like to follow through with what Hubert has just described. Basically focusing on the two main issues: what is happening under COVID-19, our stock exchanges and supply chains. We are facing a huge sharp fall in our stock exchange capital flight. Kenya, for example, Nairobi Stock Exchange lost 458 billion shillings. Historic, has never happened before to this extent. Africa, as the World Bank just reported, is facing a recession for the first in 25 years. And the output costs to the continent are estimated at 37 to 79 billion. For 2020 alone, growth rates cut down to negatives, 2.1 to about negative 5% in GDP growth. So we are in for a very, very sharp correction in our path to growth. Now, on the impacts and what sovereign wealth funds and pension funds are capable of doing, we've already seen, as Hubert just pointed out, about the case of Nigeria, which has put in $150 million. In many senses, whatever sovereign wealth funds and pension funds do towards COVID is a bit of a correction for the capital flight that is taking place. And this correction, for example, in the case of Nigeria, is being directed to the three-tier levels of the economy. And we are not alone. You know, Norway dipped into its sovereign wealth fund, Iran did, China did. And to the extent that sovereign wealth funds, our sovereign wealth funds, especially African sovereign wealth funds, invest normally in international markets, any withdrawals under the stabilization fund are corrections of that capital flight. And perhaps withdrawals for COVID then can be described as reverse flows that are counter the capital flight. And perhaps to whatever extent we do not know, we'll begin to the journey for corrections. And I think there's a lesson to be learned here, that our capital market, our sovereign wealth funds and pension funds, which normally put their portfolios in international markets, should begin to find a way through opportunities through COVID to return home to domestic investment. And here, I think one of the sterling performances that is taking place is the work of the African Development Fund. Two conspicuous activities: the $3 billion bond, already oversubscribed to about 4.6 billion, to fight COVID. And it goes in the same direction because this is a drawing from global markets to the continent to attempt to help with the corrections for COVID impacts. And then the facility that has just been announced for 10 billion, a facility which African Development Bank is going to operate towards mitigating COVID effects. Now, there's an element which also works in the same direction of correcting capital flows, which is that some governments have taken measures to ensure that shareholder outflows are taxed. Kenya just raised the withholding tax for shareholder dividends, etc., raised it up to by about 50% to 15% from 10%. And we are not alone. I think we should begin taking lessons from other countries, even developed economies, because here we can see the case of Germany, which has attached to its stimulus package, attached to corporate assistance, attached a requirement that we should try, that companies should delay dividend payments. So in a sense, those are two important elements, dynamics that are going on in the capital markets, and lessons are that we should try in every possible way when we use our economic stabilization windows, try to help that correction and learn lessons from that. Now, the second main topic is that of partnerships with policymakers. This, in my view, is critical. Governments, however difficult it has been, African governments have tried to create bailout funds and stimulus packages. And some of these packages have directly assisted the corporate sector of the economy. And it is very clear in my mind that we should try and begin to convert some of the assistance to corporates, use this to build bridges between government and regulatory bodies, and also with corporate enterprises. And that collaboration should begin to see some element of conversion of equity of the assistance portfolio, or some of the stabilization assistance to equity stakes. In other words, there is no way, I think, going forward, we can strictly separate government assistance to corporates from corporate operations. In a sense, I think we will need a collaboration to be built, bridges to be built between government and government assistance to corporates, to be built to corporate running of enterprises. So we will need to see some conversion of some of the stimulus package to corporates into equity stakes. Here is the opportunity for sovereign wealth funds and pension funds. The opportunity is that the rollback of portfolio holdings government portfolio holdings from the stimulus packages, the portfolio holdings can be rolled back to sovereign wealth funds. And why is this so critical going forward? It is important that the collaboration produces some co-investing with emphasis on methods to fight back events like COVID-19, events such as governance issues that might disrupt the operations of corporates, events such as private sector decisions that might be negative to nature, might be negative to the environment, might be negative to governance. And it's an opportunity to basically put in Santiago principles, which most of you are familiar with, put them right in the heart of government-private sector collaboration in industry. So I would like to add one element, one or two elements, which I think are also important in going forward. And this is what Hubert called the macroeconomic policy expectations going forward. The main event here is that COVID-19 has compromised markets, compromised the market system very significantly. In other words, the expected traditional policy of, for example, monetary and fiscal policy mix to drive economic recovery won't work unless we also take account of the kind of impacts that COVID has brought about on the supply side of the economy. In this case, in the current instance, supply side impacts of COVID are already reducing the power of monetary policy and fiscal policy. In other words, it doesn't matter how much money you throw at business, if you have stay-at-home rules and you have lockdowns and you have social distancing and you have paid leave to workers without producing goods and services, then the market cannot work. You know, the credit that you expect from central banks to be absorbed into rebuilding the economy cannot take place on its own. Neither can, and on the other hand, many governments do not only not have the fiscal space to support the stimulus packages, but the fiscal spending seems to be very, very strongly compromised towards supporting livelihoods, supporting small and micro enterprises, supporting households, rather than big industry. So in a sense, we have to have a meeting point between monetary policy, fiscal policy, and a recovery from recovery of households from below.
You now, have you made your key recommendations? Because I'd like, I understand Uche has just come on the line and was going to compliment, I'm sure, some of the points that you were making as good recommendations.
One of the key recommendations is that we should find ways to find a method to convert stimulus packages, some kind of government equity, which can be rolled back to sovereign wealth funds. In other words, sovereign wealth funds should be sort of in unwinding some of the stimulus package support. We should enhance the role of sovereign wealth funds that operate domestically rather than placing their portfolios abroad.
Okay.
And then let me make this final point, 2 points, and I'll be done for now, Hubert.
Okay.
One is that in this kind of scenario, where markets are compromised, and you need a third element of stabilization, other than monetary policy, fiscal policy. You need this element where you have government on the table. You will need some kind of private sector representation in setting expenditure priorities, in setting fiscal expenditure priorities. Now, all this boils down to a proposal that I would like to suggest to the team, that Africa investors should maybe find a way of issuing a path-breaking and historic study to create a path going forward, a new path for sovereign wealth funds in the post-COVID era. Thank you very much.
Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.